Hey, Adam here, and welcome back. I've done a big deep dive on the disappearance of Nora Quoirin, so get your thinking hat on for this one because there are a lot of complexities. These are all of the facts surrounding the disappearance that I'm aware of. Even though this happened in 2019, it's still very much not over, and I want to raise awareness, and you'll come to see why. Right, now let's zoom into Malaysia. Nora was 15 years old when she disappeared, and at the time she was with her family on holiday near the capital, Kuala Lumpur. There, the family was staying at the Dusun holiday resort right on the edge of a rainforest. This was reported by The Independent on the 4th of August 2019. A girl from London with learning difficulties has gone missing in Malaysia, a family friend has said. Police with sniffer dogs have launched a search for Nora. Her parents discovered she was not in her hotel room at about 6:30 in the morning on Sunday and that the window was open, according to a friend. The friend added that Nora's parents were frantic, which you can obviously imagine here, and she also said that it's completely out of character for Nora to just go wandering off. In my opinion, Nora's disappearance was very odd, and right off the bat, as you're probably expecting, the search dogs could not locate Nora's scent during this search. Well, there's actually more on that later. So from what we understand so far, the working theory was that Nora had exited through the window and had entered the rainforest. However, a lot of people don't believe that she would ever do that because she was practically attached at the hip to her parents, and we'll get into all of this. The Irish Times then reported that because Nora's mother is Irish and her father is French, their respective governments had reached out and just helped to support. That did actually translate into search efforts too, and it did certainly mean that diplomats in the country were helping out with guidance. Still, as per the 4th of August 2019, the Daily Mail offered some more information in regards to the thought process as to what may have happened. They stated that the authorities had estimated that she'd gone missing sometime around midnight. It's not clear exactly why they thought that, but that was the suspicion. The Daily Mail stated this: "It is not yet clear if Nora left her hotel room of her own accord or whether she was taken." That statement is the dividing line of the two camps, and we'll explore this as we move forwards. Right, so on to the 5th of August 2019. The Guardian published an article titled "Nora Quoirin, Malaysian Police Deny Case is Being Treated as Possible Foul Play." However, the Guardian also stated this: "After Malaysian police insisted that it was not being treated as foul play, the charity said, contrary to several reports that the police are not treating Nora's disappearance as though it could be a result of foul play, the family have been told directly by the police that they are treating it as both potential foul play and as a missing persons case." Interestingly, the article from The Independent stated that they realised Nora was missing at 6:30 am. However, The Guardian reported, "Nora's father raised the alarm when he discovered her missing from her bedroom at 8 am on Sunday. Her window had been opened. Police said they have dispatched more than 100 officers and sniffer dogs in the resort and surrounding areas." Both statements here can't be true, so I'm not sure what's happened here other than someone's got it wrong. But because this is the later article, it's probably the best bet to assume that the Guardian's report is more accurate. Matthew Sale, who is the chief executive at LBT Global, which is an overseas crisis support group, stated this: "This is a very vulnerable young girl missing in a remote location. She has been missing for over 24 hours now, and it is imperative that every resource available is deployed to search for her." And finally, just as per this article, I want to bring you the feelings and the thoughts of the family. Nora's aunt stated this: "Nora is a child with special needs and has learning and developmental disabilities which make her especially vulnerable, and we fear for her safety. Nora would not know how to get help and would never leave her family voluntarily. We now consider this a criminal matter. We are appealing to everyone to assist the local police in any way that they can." So as per this point, we can see that the authorities' official position seems to be that this was accidental. Their private position to the family seems to be that they're looking in both directions, that it could be foul play or she could have just wandered off. The family's position at this stage seemed to be that it was almost certainly foul play. That's pretty odd honestly, but I think more so indicates that law enforcement had no real idea as to what had happened here. My personal position is that I'm with the family here, in that I've worked with many children who have special educational needs, and I do believe that she wouldn't have just gone out into the pitch black jungle alone. Right, so let's now have a look at the Daily Mail. Just to solidify what was just said, here's what was reported. The family of Nora Quoirin insist that she was most likely taken from her hotel room in Malaysia and have slammed the police for claiming otherwise. Her parents have described the police's claims that there was no foul play as very strange. We actually get some more information in regards to the exact point of disappearance. This is what Matthew Sale had to say. Nora's family are extremely concerned and believe at this stage the most likely scenario is that she was taken. The room was accessible to members of the public and there is no security due to the nature of the resort. The accommodation leads straight out into the open jungle, so there is a lot of concern about where she could have been taken or where she is now. Because this was making headline news and many people were talking about it, and obviously because they wanted to find her, over 200 police officers had been assigned to the search, and remember, we're still on the 5th of August 2019 here, so that was fairly fast. At this point in the research, I was actually feeling pretty damn frustrated because, as reported by The Sun, Nora's distraught parents woke at 7 AM on Sunday to find her room empty and a window popped open. Good actual lord, is it 6:30, 8 or 7 in the morning when this discovery was made? Very frustrating actually, because these details are important and it's not clear to me why all of these articles are contradicting each other. You think that this might be settled? The BBC have stated 8 AM, so let's just go with that. Right, Matthew Sale made another statement. Here's what he said. Nora would not have been able to open the window on her own and it was found propped open. They also know that Nora would not have walked off anywhere on her own. There was no sign of a struggle in the room, but we still believe that she was taken. It seems to me that as of right now, there are 3 possibilities here. One is that Nora simply left on her own accord, though if it wouldn't have been possible for her to open the window, then that's difficult. The second is that as the parents suspected, there was third-party involvement here. The final suggestion here, and obviously I can't say whether this is the case or not, but is there any possibility at all that she might have seen something through the window that caught her attention and maybe drew her in? You know, perhaps an animal or someone with not so good intentions? Obviously it's very doubtful that an animal could have helped her open the window, mind you, but could someone have helped her from the outside? It's not clear, but that is something that crossed my mind when first hearing of Nora over a year ago now, but it's just speculation and nothing more. The BBC gave some information in regards to the specific resort Nora disappeared from. Here's what was said. According to its website, the Dusun is a 12-acre orchard resort in the foothills of the Titiwangsa Mountains and sits next to the 4,000-acre Berumbum Forest Reserve. It has a maximum capacity of 20 adults split across 7 houses. The resort's nearest neighbours are 2 Temuan villages where most of its staff are from. Probably butchered a lot of names there, and I apologise if that's the case. But we're moving on to the 6th of August now, and what you're about to hear really set off all the alarm bells for me, because this is just odd. The Daily Mail published an article titled "Police Dogs Lose Trail of Missing Nora Quoirin, just yards from Jungle Eco Resort in Malaysia, where she vanished." Let's have a further look. The family of a girl who disappeared on holiday in a Malaysian jungle resort believe police are missing vital clues by ignoring fears that she was taken. Relatives lashed out after it emerged that sniffer dogs lost the scent of Nora Quoirin just 100 yards from the Eco Lodge bungalow where she vanished. Authorities in Malaysia are adamant that the British 15-year-old who has learning difficulties knowingly ventured out of the rented property that borders thick jungle and got lost. The search has so far seen hundreds of soldiers, police and firefighters, along with sniffer dogs and a helicopter, scour the jungle. 180 individuals continued to comb a 20-acre area of dense forest last night. Police Chief Mohammed Mat Yusuf said, "We will do our best and will not give up hope. We feel she did not go far. We have nothing that suggests third-party involvement in her disappearance. We don't have an ounce of evidence to suggest that." The police chief said sniffer dogs were used to investigate the scene only hours after Nora's disappearance. He added, "They only picked up a scent some 100 metres from the resort. They lost the trail after that." Okay, there's a lot of rich information to take in here, but I will say that from my understanding, the dogs picking up a scent like that only to disappear is atypical if she was still in the area. Now, to be fair, when you look at research journals of the effectiveness of search dogs, you'll find that they normally indicate that the dogs are very effective, but that further studies are required in terms of being location specific. So it could be possible that the effectiveness increases or decreases depending on the environment. It is worth pointing out that search dogs have been used for at least 600 years in all manners of locations, so to be fair, that probably speaks for itself. So what could have happened here? The search dogs are able to follow the scent for around 100 metres, which is around 110 yards, and at that point they completely lose the scent. The way this has been reported, and especially because the jungle was where the search was being conducted, the search dogs likely led them towards the jungle. That means that it's unlikely there was a vehicle there since the window opens up to the jungle. So why was her scent lost? Where did she go exactly? As she ventured into the jungle, did her scent just gradually disappear? It's an odd factor and I'm not really sure. Typically, you'll hear from dog search leaders that if the scent is there, the dogs will find them. Here are some other interesting comments from Matthew Searle and others. Matthew said, "Nora never goes anywhere by herself. We have no reason to believe she wandered off and is lost." The resort then said, "The Eco Hotel admitted the window in Nora's bedroom may have been opened from the outside, contradicting earlier police statements." The trust working with the family then said this, "It's unlikely that Nora could have opened the window on her own. She's understood to have been sharing the bedroom with her younger siblings. From what we know too, it doesn't appear that the younger siblings heard or saw anything." Moving on to the 7th of August 2019, we actually start to hear some of the very odd and suspicious information. On this day, the Malaysian police for the first time publicly admitted that there was a possibility that Nora had been taken. Previously, they'd said that there wasn't any evidence. However, on the 7th, they confirmed that they had discovered unidentified fingerprints at the jungle cottage where Nora disappeared. The police chief then refused to give any further information. However, he did say this, and this was reported by the Daily Mail. Police Chief Zakaria also clarified that it was the window in the living hall downstairs that was left open, and not the one in the bedroom upstairs where the girl was. He then declined to say if the window could be opened from the outside, saying the investigation was ongoing. That's particularly fascinating because so far it feels like we've been led to believe that the window in question was inside the bedroom, but now we're learning that the window of concern was downstairs in the living hall. So what's the theory in that case then? That Nora had gone downstairs for a drink or something like that and then left through the window? Or are we saying that someone else came inside the cottage? That's just very strange. Interestingly, The Guardian reported that members of the Senoi Prak, I've probably butchered that, but they're a special police team comprised of indigenous tribes who are famed for their forest tracking skills, and they combed through the dense forestry. Their search too ended in failure though, and it doesn't appear that they were able to find any footprints or anything of that nature. We have some amount of confusion again, because on the 8th of August 2019, the BBC reported that her bedroom window was open, but we've literally just heard the Daily Mail report that the police chief said it wasn't the bedroom window, but it was the downstairs living hall window. I don't really know what to tell you about these contradictions, other than these are some basic facts you'd think we'd come to an understanding of. Right, just putting that aside, on the 9th we hear that footprints have been discovered in the jungle. This is what The Independent had to say. Footprints thought to belong to missing British teenager Nora Quoirin have been discovered in the Malaysian jungle. Authorities are operating on the theory that she is lost in the jungle and have deployed hundreds of officers, drones and helicopters within a 6-kilometre radius of the hotel. The footprints were found by the Fire and Rescue Department sniffer dogs on Thursday, according to the division's Assistant Director, Ahmed Mokhtar. What's interesting here is that it appears as though the footprints indicated that Nora was alone, in that I can't find mention of it looking as though there was more than one person present. This was obviously their focus point now, but further searches of the surrounding area didn't yield any results. They didn't find any further clues, but the teams were optimistic. On the 10th of August 2019, we learned that the authorities began to scale the search down from a 12-kilometre radius to just 4. You've got to imagine that because they weren't able to find anything at all after the discovery of the footprints, they just couldn't believe that she'd gone that far. The Deputy Commissioner said that they just don't have any leads at all, but they are continuing the search. and that there was just no evidence at all to point in the direction of foul play. Right, we're moving on to the 12th now, and things are about to get weird. So weird actually that I've rewritten this about 5 times, so let's get bizarre. I'm just going to read you the headline, and there's many just like this one, but this one is from The Sun. Missing Nora Quoirin was taken by a genie, claims Malaysian shaman brought in by cops to crack the case. So firstly, what's interesting to me right off the bat here is that the police themselves brought the shamans in, which seems to indicate that there are these kinds of beliefs present among the force too. Here's what was reported. Malaysian shamans who have joined cops from Ireland, France and the UK to search for missing Brit Nora Quoirin claim she was lured away by a genie. As the desperate search for Nora enters its second week, the medicine men have been seen crying and praying in the dense jungle for her safe return. Wearing skull caps while performing ancient rituals, the shamans sat cross-legged on the jungle floor and covered their eyes. Right, one of the shamans, called Khalid Mohammed, said that a genie is an invisible spirit that inhabits the earth and is able to influence people by appearing in the form of humans or animals. As someone who doesn't know all that much about this kind of thing, the only thing I can really add is that I find it absolutely bizarre that you can find these kinds of accounts throughout the whole world who speak of these kinds of entities almost verbatim. Anyway, back to Khalid. He said that the genie was drawn to Nora because she has special needs and had chosen Nora as its stepdaughter, which is probably the creepiest thing we'll all hear today, I'm sure. He said, "Tonight, I will ask for the spirit to return her from where she was taken and the condition they took her. But they will ask for something in exchange. That will be between me and them. Most important now, the child will be released. She is here now, so we will stay here tonight to see if we can find her, and then we can know why she went missing." Can you even imagine if there genuinely is more to these kinds of beliefs and superstitions than we actually realise or are willing to believe? I said earlier that perhaps she was drawn to something outside. Just how creepy would it be if it was something like this pretending to be an animal or a familiar person? The thought of that is just awful and sick. What I do find interesting though is that these shamans were brought in by the police, so they clearly take these beliefs and rituals very seriously. Right. Now we're moving on to the 13th of August 2019, because this is when the discovery of Nora's body was made, 10 days after the initial disappearance. It was a local team of hikers who found her around 1.6 miles away from the resort. Let's just have a look at The Guardian for more details. The body was uncovered near a stream at around 2 PM by members of the Seremban Hikers Club who had joined police. The area in the Batemba Mountains where the discovery was made, and which was described by the police chief as not an accessible area, had been scoured by rescue teams days earlier. How can the area simultaneously be an inaccessible place, and yet there she was? It's also interesting to note that they had searched that very area before. The Daily Mail offers some more details, and it's important to state that she was found completely clothesless, including missing footwear, though she was barefoot initially when she left. We've heard Nora's body was found near a stream, and the Daily Mail states that there was a waterfall nearby too, and the Telegraph said that this was in a ravine. Just interestingly, and perhaps a coincidence, she had told her family that she was excited to visit a waterfall when they first arrived. When they first found Nora, the police chief was asked directly to comment on the state of the body, presumably because a lot of people were feeling that this could have been as a result of foul play. Well, the police chief refused to comment on the condition right away. The day afterwards, on the 14th, we get to hear some brief comments from those who carried out the autopsy. They basically stated that they weren't able to determine the cause of passing, and the deputy police chief said that there's nothing they can say yet until they know more. Okay, now we're gonna have to get weird again. This question was posed by the Daily Mail. Was Nora moved? Volunteer who found Nora's body believes she could not have been there when search teams first checked the area because she was lying in plain sight with her head on her hands. Let's hear a bit more about that. A volunteer who found the missing teen's body said today that he believes she could not have been in the spot for very long because previous searches of the area would have found her. He theorised that she had been lost in the jungle and had walked to a waterfall close to where she was found in order to get a drink and had collapsed. That's really strange. The whole thing is strange actually, just the fact that she went out in the first place. I can't even imagine how this must have felt for her loved ones. But I do know that they wanted answers. Still on the 14th, Nora's parents question as to whether she could have been placed there after the fact, and you can absolutely see why they would have posed that question. It's so hard to believe that she was there for the entire time. The indigenous people know this type of terrain better than most of us can ever even appreciate, and when they said that she's highly unlikely to have been near there when they first searched the area, I believe them. You'd imagine that if she was close by, the searchers or the dogs might have found her, but that didn't happen. So just to be specific, the questioning coming from the family and posed by Matthew Searle was this. We have a large amount of questions. One of those questions is, has the body been there all the time, or is there a third party involvement? Was the body dumped there afterwards? Right, let's move on to the 15th, and I want to be very careful about how I express this next part. Those performing the autopsy stated that they believed that Nora had passed away as a result of hunger and stress. They said that it appears as though a stomach ulcer had burst and that this was the cause. They also said that there was no sign that she was taken, nor was there any sign that she'd been assaulted or indecently assaulted. According to The Sun, they also stated that she'd been alive for a week before passing away. I found that statement odd, actually. Perhaps there are specifics that aren't being made clear, but Nora's body was found on the 13th, so 9 days after she went missing. The exact location her body was discovered had been searched days prior, so if they're confident that she was alive for 1 week before passing away, doesn't that leave 2 days unaccounted for when she wasn't in the area that she was later found? It's not like they could have missed her, because a volunteer who took part in the search stated that she wasn't covered in any foliage at all. It's just so odd that it's quite hard to really wrap your head around that. I suppose the working theory is that she wandered on over to the final position after the searchers cleared the area, but then they shouldn't have stated that she was alive for 7 days. Unless of course the press just got that wrong, though you'd like to think that they'd get these things right. In practice though, I'm not so sure a lot of the time anymore. The family, as you might imagine, were not completely convinced by the results of the post-mortem, and this statement was made. We don't want the media to interpret the first results of the autopsy and exclude the criminal hypothesis. It's too early to say that. The family still finds it difficult to understand that she would have gone into the jungle on her own. They are concerned that she did not leave on her own. Even the place where she was found, over a mile away from the resort, it's very strange that she could go there by herself, so we cannot exclude the criminal hypothesis. The Mirror also reported that she had passed away 2 to 4 days before being found. That's very surprising actually, because her body was found in an area already searched just a few days before being found. That is very odd, and I can completely see why the family were asking these questions. In fact, I've got to be honest, based on what I'm reading, I'm finding it difficult to believe as well. Nora's grandfather put this very succinctly, and I found myself in complete agreement of the notion. She wasn't there yet during any of the previous searches. Someone put her there to get rid of her. Can you imagine her walking 2.5 kilometers clothesless and barefoot over rocks in the middle of the night? That's absurd. I would add as well that the area was officially described as being inaccessible, so it's even more strange than that. The parents were completely bewildered by this, and you can probably imagine that. The circumstances in this disappearance are honestly just wild, and I'll tell you why. The only working theory that makes sense here is that Nora got up and left the resort on her own because there is absolutely no forensic evidence to suggest otherwise. And despite that being Occam's razor, it doesn't make any damn sense either, given everything that we've discussed so far. The range of days in which she passed away and then being found, despite a previous search taking place in the area she was discovered in that kind of range, is weird. And on the other hand, you might say, well, hey, it must be that someone came in and took her unwillingly. Well, what is the evidence of that? If there's no evidence of injury, assault, indecent assault, or anything of that nature, what happened? It's also hard to believe that someone had taken her away from the site, because then you need to explain how she was placed back there and why the dogs led to the jungle. Of course, it is possible, but it's made very risky and dangerous because there's so many people out looking for her, including a lot of law enforcement officers. Okay, hang on. Let me be absolutely specific. There was some bruises on her legs and minor cuts on her feet, but they looked to be explainable by suggesting that she'd been walking clothesless in this harsh area. Although, just to clarify, you'd expect far more than just cuts in that kind of terrain. And just to clarify as well, the authorities did say that the bruises on the legs and the cuts would not have caused someone to pass away. It's very difficult to understand what happened here, and it makes me so frustrated when this happens to young people. I mean with everyone really, but you know what I mean, just complete innocence and then something bizarre like this happens. We're not done yet, there's more. I want you to hear this quote. Nora could not have reached the steep ravine where her body was found by herself, a search team member in Malaysia has claimed. The volunteer, an expert in the area, said it would have been impossible for the barefoot 15-year-old to walk across the forest on her own. I'm not sure if I've mentioned this yet, but Nora's disabilities covered both physical and mental. It's just important that we bear that in mind. Let's continue. Nora couldn't have gotten there by herself. I struggled to walk. The path is difficult for even an able-bodied person. Dense vegetation snags your feet. The roots and rocks are wet. My boots were destroyed by the end, and Nora was barefoot. The gradient of the slope range was 20 to 40%. Nora would have had to cross 2 streams. When you have people who have lived in these areas for their entire life, I think it's important that we listen to them. Malaysian law enforcement tried to backtrack, saying that inexperienced cops might have missed her. That's hard to believe, given that where she was found, it was in an area where there was no foliage covering her at all. Can you even believe this kind of situation? You've come from a place where you're not even remotely familiar with this kind of culture or belief system, and then the cops take you, the family, to mediums, or shamans I guess, to plead with spirits to return your daughter. Well, that's what happened. I quote, Nora's distraught parents were said to have been invited to the 2-hour audience the day before Nora was found, but they left just after an hour. A source stated police were under pressure and really struggling with the case. They wanted to do anything and everything they could to find a breakthrough. And during the ceremony, which took place on Pantai Hill, the mediums asked spirits to return Nora to her family, which many locals believe was behind her being found. You can see why the locals believe that something completely beyond the ordinary had happened here. They're looking at this and thinking, look at how harsh the terrain is. Nora had a disability which affected her physically. Look at how fast she got. Oh, she wasn't injured at all, apart from the bruises on her legs and the cuts on her feet. Where are the clothes? Oh, there's no evidence of anything nefarious happening. She was found in an area that was extensively searched. You know, what was the motive here for someone to have taken her? She wasn't injured and nothing of that nature had happened here. Nora's disappearance is very unsettling and honestly borderline unbelievable. Here's a change of pace, but this needs to be reported even though it makes me feel a bit uncomfortable. There was an Irish lawyer called Anne Brennan who tried to claim that the family were involved in this somehow. Here's what she said. The family did everything in their power to subvert the course of justice. They somehow convinced the Malaysian authorities to abandon their inquiry and release Nora's body without producing the necessary forensic and toxicology reports that form the part of every standard criminal investigation. All the simple routine things that happen in a missing child case and criminal investigation failed to happen in the case of Nora. There was no evidence of a struggle, no fingerprints, footprints or screams. Nobody heard anything. Malaysian police said that Nora did not go alone. A third party was involved and the third party was someone known to Nora. Well, what can you really say about that? It's very difficult to comment on that, only I go by official reports from law enforcement and I can't see them suspecting or accusing the family. Though when you have a complete and total lack of evidence and an unbelievable set of circumstances that you have here, everything must become suspect. I'd pose this argument, and I'd like to hear from someone that knows more about these kinds of areas than I do. If the family had done this, where were the footprints? Why weren't there any other footprints leading to the body? If it's next to a stream, in theory you'd expect some muddiness. I just can't board that train. I'm not saying it's impossible or anything like that, but I'm just not there. Am I wrong? Could that have been the case? You let me know your thoughts. At this point, I want to quote Sean Yeep, the searcher who discovered Nora. Here's what was said. "It looked like she was sleeping. Her head was resting on her hands, but we all knew she wasn't with us. It was very sad, and 2 women in the group did not want to come close and they started crying. I could see the body. She was lying with her hands behind her head like you do when you go to sleep. There were some scratches on her arm and some bruises, but otherwise there were no injuries. I am not sure, but I think she had passed away a few days ago. The place where she was found is not easy to find. I wonder if she had been following the stream, as there were no footprints, which means she could have been walking in the water as it was not very deep. It's just bizarre, so there were absolutely no footprints at all to speak of. Just based on what we know of Nora, I can't imagine that she would know to follow the stream. Just what happened here? Right, moving forwards now to the 17th of December 2019, Nora's family seem to be absolutely convinced that not all is how it seems in this instance, and who can blame them? Nora's parents stated, and this was reported by the BBC, it would have been impossible, physically and mentally, to imagine that Nora could have got any distance at all. She never even walked as far as our neighbour's front door by herself. For us, something very complex happened. We have insisted from the beginning that we believe there was a criminal element to what happened. To think that Nora might get up in the middle of the night, clothesless and barefoot, then get out of the bungalow into the jungle, bearing in mind the terrain is extremely steep and dangerous in total darkness, makes absolutely no sense. We think it is absurd to think about this possibility. Right, we're moving forwards almost an entire year now, and we're going to look at the 1st of September 2020. A lot of analysis had been done in this time in terms of the whole disappearance really, but here's what the family lawyer had said according to The Sun. We know that she had passed away 4 days prior to being found in the flowing stream. Interesting. Now, if that's accurate, I don't know how to provide any meaningful explanation. Remember, the area where her body was found was searched just a couple of days before she was found. She wasn't there. So if she passed away days before the first search of the area, then how did she get there? Was she just missed? Maybe, but as the searcher said, there was no foliage at all covering her. I would also point out that because of Nora's disability, it's very difficult to imagine that she made it 1.6 miles away with only cuts on her feet. The searcher, who literally lives in the area, said that his boots were absolutely destroyed. That is so odd. Also, an important point was that her clothes were never found, so where in the world did they end up? On the 12th of November, another point in regards to the condition of the feet was made by a family member and reported by The Guardian. This is what was said. Nora's father said that when he identified Nora's body, he noticed that her feet were dirty but not injured in the way that would be expected had she have walked barefoot through the jungle for days. Police maintain that their investigation found no sign of criminal activity, and there was no indication that she'd been taken. Nora's mother and father have criticised the police. So other than being dirty and the cuts, her feet were in good condition in terms of not being injured. That hardly sounds like someone who's managed to wade through 1.6 miles of harsh terrain only to be found basically uninjured. Right, let's move to the 30th of November now, and I want to quote the Daily Mail, who heard from a British pathologist who performed the second autopsy. This is what was said. Nathaniel Kari, a British pathologist who performed a second post-mortem on Nora's body, said the Malaysian post-mortem had been thorough, and he agreed with Malaysia's findings that the teenager had passed away as a result of intestinal problems due to starvation and stress. But still, he added, it was difficult to ascertain in what circumstances the passing occurred due to decomposition. He agreed with Nora's family lawyer that foreign DNA, if it exists, could have been washed away, as her feet and hands were immersed in water for a few days before the body was found. Asked by the family lawyer, he could not exclude the possibility that her body may have been placed at the site where it was found after her passing, given that rescuers searched that specific location. He also agreed that there was no evidence that Nora had any major faults in the rough terrain despite her physical disabilities. However, Carey told the Malaysian virtual inquest that the multiple lacerations and scratches on Nora's body indicated that she had moved through the dense undergrowth. The cuts on her feet were not trivial, he said. I'm going to end with these final bits. This was the coroner, Maimuna Aid's final conclusions. After hearing all of the relevant evidence, I rule that there was no one involved in the passing of Nora Ann. It's more probable than not that she passed away by misadventure. Maimuna said there were no suspicious circumstances prior to the disappearance. There were no ransom requests and no signs of intrusion. The teenager probably left the accommodation on her own and subsequently got lost. For me to speculate and presume of her actions and involvement of a third party without any proof, that would be a breach of my duty, so the inquiry is hereby closed. Here's the family's response. Once again, we see that justice struggles to support the most vulnerable in society, only engaging with special needs at a surface level and not at the level that truly reflects children like Nora. We believe we have fought not just for Nora, but in honour of all the special needs children in this world who deserve our most committed support and the most careful application of justice. This is Nora's unique legacy and we will never let it go. I then found that it looks like the family are set to challenge the inquest rulings and are lawyering up in the hopes to find answers. I looked around, but I couldn't find any way to support the family, so it doesn't look like there are any kind of donations set up. Right, with all of that being said, those are all of the facts that I'm aware of surrounding Nora's disappearance. Thank you for joining me on this deep dive, and now I'm going to hand it over to you in the comments section for some discussion. I'd just like to say thank you for watching, and please do subscribe and give the video a thumbs up if you thought I did a good job with this one, or a thumbs down if you thought I didn't. I'm just looking for your honest opinion. I'd also just like to say a massive thank you to the patrons who literally help me keep sane, so thank you very much for your support. Other than that, I hope you've had a good day or evening depending on where you are, and I'll see you next time. Be safe guys. Peace.